I paid to fix my parents' house, but they gave it to my sister. I didn't argue. I sent a group email to the family with receipts. My dad's silence was deafening. You know that feeling when you're just cruising through life thinking everything's solid and then bam, reality hits you like a freight train? Yeah, that was me last month, sitting in my Honda Civic outside my parents' house, staring at a text message that basically flipped my whole world upside down. Let me back up a bit. I'm 31, been grinding at my marketing job for like 8 years now, finally making decent money. Not rolling in dough or anything, but comfortable enough to help out family when they need it. And man, did my parents need it. Their house, the same 2-story colonial where I grew up, where dad taught me to ride a bike in the driveway and mom made Sunday pancakes every week, was falling apart. I'm talking serious issues here. The roof leaked every time it rained, half the electrical outlets didn't work, and the kitchen looked like something from the 70s, complete with that gross avocado green everything. So when they mentioned they were stressed about repairs but couldn't afford them on dad's retirement income, I stepped up. No hesitation. These are my parents, right? The people who raised me, put me through college, supported my dreams even when I wanted to major in art history before switching to business. I dropped 20 grand on that house. $20,000. That's like a really nice used car or a killer vacation to Europe. Instead, I spent it on a brand new roof, updated wiring that wouldn't burn the place down, and a kitchen renovation that would make those HGTV people jealous. We're talking granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, the whole 9 yards. Thus contractors were these local guys who did amazing work. Took about 3 months to get everything done, and I was there almost every weekend, checking progress, making sure everything was perfect. Mom would make sandwiches for the crew, and Dad would chat with them about sports. It felt good, you know, like we were all working together to make something beautiful. When it was all finished, the house looked incredible, like seriously magazine-worthy. Mom cried when she saw the kitchen, and Dad kept walking around taking pictures with his phone, probably to show all his buddies at the diner where he has coffee every morning. They were so grateful. Kept thanking me, telling everyone who would listen about their generous daughter who saved their home. Dad even said, and I remember this exactly because it meant so much to me, "This house will be yours someday, kiddo. Consider this an investment in your future." Mom nodded along, adding that since I was the one who cared enough to fix it up, it only made sense that I'd inherit it eventually. My sister Vivian wasn't around much anyway, always traveling for her photography work or whatever she was calling her latest adventure. Update, just wanted to check in with everyone following this story. The responses have been incredible, and honestly, reading your comments is helping me process everything that happened. Some of you are asking if I had anything in writing about the house situation, and unfortunately, no. It was all verbal promises from my parents. Lesson learned there. But trust me, the story gets way crazier. Should I tell you about the family email that changed everything, or are you not ready for that level of drama yet? Life went on pretty normally after that. I kept helping my parents with smaller stuff. Groceries, utility bills when they were tight, car repairs. Nothing huge, but consistent support because that's what family does, right? At least that's what I thought family did. Vivian would pop in every few months, usually when she needed money or a place to crash between her various projects. She's always been the free spirit of the family, the artistic one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. While I was studying for exams and working part-time jobs through college, she was backpacking through Europe on mom and dad's credit card. While I was building my career and being responsible, she was pursuing her passion for photography, which seemed to involve a lot of expensive equipment and very little actual income. Don't get me wrong, I love my sister. But there's always been this dynamic where I'm the reliable one who handles business, and she's the beloved baby who gets away with everything. Growing up, if something went wrong, it was somehow my fault for not being mature enough to prevent it. If Vivian needed something, I was expected to share or sacrifice because I was older and should understand. I figured we'd grown out of that pattern. I mean, we're both adults now, right? Surely things would be different. Then came that text message I mentioned. I was grabbing lunch at this little sandwich shop near my office when my phone buzzed. It was from my cousin Jake, who lives a few states over but keeps up with family gossip better than anyone. "Hey, congrats on Viv getting the house. Mom said your parents signed it over to her last week. Pretty cool that she'll have a place to settle down finally." I literally choked on my turkey club, actually started coughing so hard that the guy at the next table asked if I was okay. I read the message 3 more times thinking maybe I misunderstood. But no, it was crystal clear. My parents had signed the house over to Vivian, the house I had spent $20,000 renovating, the house they promised would be mine someday. The house where I had invested not just money, but time, energy, and emotional attachment to preserving our family memories. I sat in my car for probably 20 minutes, just staring at that text. My hands were shaking, partly from anger, partly from hurt, mostly from complete disbelief. How do you process something like that? How do you wrap your head around the fact that the people you trust most in the world just completely betrayed that trust? Finally, I called my mom. Tried to keep my voice steady, act like I was just checking in. "Oh, honey," she said when I casually mentioned Jake's text. "We were going to tell you soon. Vivian's been having such a hard time lately, and she needs stability. You're doing so well for yourself, and you have your own apartment. This just made sense." Made sense. Those words hit me like a slap. What made sense was honoring their promise to the daughter who had actually invested in the property. What made sense was having a conversation before making such a huge decision. What made sense was treating both daughters with equal respect and consideration. But apparently, none of that actually made sense to them. I hung up without getting angry or making a scene. Just said I had to go and ended the call. Then I drove to my apartment, opened a bottle of wine, and started going through every document, receipt, and photo I had from the renovation project. Because here's the thing, I keep records of everything. Always have. It's part of why I'm good at my job and why I've been able to build a solid financial foundation for myself. Every contractor payment, every material receipt, every email exchange about the project, I had it all, organized in a folder on my laptop and backed up in cloud storage. Looking through those documents was like reliving the whole experience, except now with the bitter taste of betrayal coloring every memory. Here was the estimate from the roofing company. Here were photos of water damage from before we fixed the leak. Here was the electrician's invoice for rewiring half the house so it wouldn't be a fire hazard. And here were the text messages, screenshots, of conversations where mom and dad talked about how grateful they were, how the house would be mine someday, how they couldn't believe they had raised such a caring and responsible daughter. I spent the whole evening going through everything, organizing it all into a clear timeline. By the time I went to bed, I had a complete record of my investment in that house and my parents' promises about its future. The next morning, I woke up with absolute clarity about what I needed to do. Update. Okay, the messages you're sending are intense. Some of you are saying I should lawyer up, others are telling me to just walk away and cut my losses. I appreciate all the advice, but honestly, this wasn't about getting the house back or even the money at this point. This was about making sure everyone knew exactly what had happened. Sometimes the truth is the most powerful weapon you have. Are you ready to hear how I used it? I drafted an email. Not a long, emotional rant, but a clear, factual summary of the situation. Professional tone, like I was presenting a case study at work. The kind of writing that's impossible to dismiss as drama or overreaction. The subject line was simple. Regarding recent property transfer and financial contributions. I started with the basic facts. Over the past year, I had contributed $20,000 toward renovating my parents' home. I included a summary of the work done and attached copies of all receipts and invoices. I mentioned that these contributions were made with the understanding that the property would eventually be part of my inheritance, as explicitly stated by both parents on multiple occasions. Then, I shared screenshots of relevant text messages and included photos showing the before and after condition of the house. The contrast was dramatic. You could see exactly how much value my investment had added to the property. Finally, I noted that the house had recently been transferred to my sister without any prior discussion with me, despite my significant financial investment and the previous assurances about inheritance. I concluded by stating that given these circumstances, I would no longer be providing financial assistance to my parents, as I needed to focus on building my own financial security and future. The tone was completely neutral. I didn't call anyone names, didn't express anger or hurt feelings, didn't make demands or threats, just presented the facts and my decision moving forward. Then came the recipient list. This wasn't going to be a private family matter anymore. I sent it to everyone. Mom, Dad, Vivian, my aunt and uncle, my cousins, my grandparents, family friends who had been around for years. Basically everyone who had heard my parents bragging about their generous daughter and their beautiful renovated home. I attached everything. Every receipt, every before photo, every after photo, every screenshot of my parents' promises. A complete digital paper trail that told the whole story without me having to say anything inflammatory. Then I hit send, and you know what? The moment that email went out, I felt this incredible sense of relief. Like I had been carrying this heavy weight and finally got to set it down. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was just done. I turned off my phone and went for a long walk around my neighborhood. Stopped at Starbucks for an iced coffee, browsed around Target for a while. Just enjoyed having a normal Saturday afternoon without family drama weighing on my mind. When I finally checked my phone that evening, it was chaos. Missed calls, text messages, voicemails. But here's the interesting part, nothing from my parents. Radio silence from the two people who should have been calling to explain or apologize or at least acknowledge what had happened. Vivian, on the other hand, had called 6 times and left increasingly frantic voicemails. The first one was confused, asking what the email was about and why I was being so dramatic. By the 6th one, she was crying and begging me to call her back so we could work this out. My aunt called to say she was shocked and had no idea I had paid for the renovations. My uncle left a voicemail saying he was proud of me for standing up for myself and that my parents owed me an explanation. My cousin Sarah texted to say she always suspected something was off about how differently my parents treated Vivian and me. But my parents? Nothing. Complete silence. Over the next few days, I started hearing through the family grapevine about conversations happening without me. Apparently my uncle had called my dad directly to ask what the heck was going on. My aunt had spoken to my mom, asking how they could justify taking my money and then giving the house to Vivian. According to my cousin Jake, who loves family gossip, my parents' response was basically that they didn't owe anyone an explanation for how they handled their own property. They claimed I had offered to pay for the renovations as a gift, with no strings attached, and that I was being vindictive and jealous because I couldn't accept their decision, which was rich, considering I had screenshots of them explicitly promising me the house would be mine someday. Vivian kept trying to reach me, alternating between angry calls where she accused me of trying to ruin her relationship with our parents, and tearful messages where she claimed she never asked for the house and didn't know I had expected to inherit it. I didn't respond to any of it. I had said what I needed to say in that email, and I wasn't interested in getting dragged into arguments or justifications. The facts spoke for themselves. Update. The support from everyone here has been overwhelming. Thank you for understanding why I needed to expose the truth instead of just quietly walking away. A lot of you are asking what happened next, and whether my parents ever tried to make things right. Well, buckle up, because the aftermath was even crazier than the original betrayal. The financial consequences hit them faster than I expected, and suddenly my silence became very expensive for them. Ready for the final chapter? Here's where things get really interesting. See, my parents had gotten pretty comfortable with me covering their extra expenses. I'm talking about way more than just the house renovation. Over the years, I had been quietly supplementing their income in dozens of ways. Groceries when they were short on cash, car repairs when something broke down, medical co-pays when Dad had his knee surgery, holiday gifts for the grandkids when their budget was tight. I never made a big deal about it, never kept track of every little expense because that's what you do for family, right? But when I actually sat down and calculated it, I was spending probably $400 or $500 a month on various forms of support for my parents. After I sent that email, all of that stopped. Immediately. Completely. Within 2 weeks, reality started hitting them. Dad's car needed new tires, and suddenly they had to figure out how to pay for it themselves. Mom wanted to get her hair done for my cousin's wedding, but their budget was too tight. Little things that they had gotten used to me handling became big problems. But the real issue was the house itself. See, when you transfer property to someone, there are tax implications. The house was now in Vivian's name, which meant she was responsible for property taxes, insurance, maintenance, all of it. And Vivian, bless her heart, had about as much financial stability as a house of cards in a hurricane. She called me crying about 3 weeks after the email incident, begging me to help her figure out how to pay the property tax bill that had just arrived. Apparently, no one had thought through the practical implications of putting the house in her name. I didn't answer her calls, but I heard through the family network that she was panicking. The property taxes on a newly renovated house in their neighborhood were substantial, way more than she could afford on her sporadic photography income. And my parents, who were already struggling without my financial help, couldn't cover it either. The insurance situation was even messier. The house had been insured under my parents' names and financial situation. Now it needed to be reinsured under Vivian's name, but she didn't have the income documentation or credit history to get decent rates. Meanwhile, the family dynamics had shifted completely. My uncle and aunt, who had always been close to my parents, were clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. Family gatherings became awkward affairs where my parents were quietly excluded from conversations or given the cold shoulder. My grandmother, who's 92 and doesn't mess around with nonsense, apparently told my mother straight up that she was embarrassed by how they had treated me and that they owed me a sincere apology and financial restitution. But the most satisfying part? My parents' reputation in their community took a serious hit. See, they had been bragging for months about their beautiful renovated home and their generous daughter who made it all possible. Now everyone knew the full story, and the contrast between their public praise and private betrayal made them look pretty awful. I heard from my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, who lives a few streets over from my parents, that the gossip had spread through their whole social circle. Their church friends, their neighbors, the people at Dad's coffee shop, everyone was talking about how they had taken advantage of their daughter's generosity and then stabbed her in the back. About 6 weeks after the email, I started getting indirect messages from family members saying my parents wanted to talk to me, wanted to explain their side, wanted to work things out, but they still weren't contacting me directly. They were too proud or too stubborn to actually pick up the phone and call their daughter to apologize. Instead, I focused on my own life. Remember that money I had been spending every month to support them? I redirected it into my savings account and started looking for my own place to buy. Not an apartment this time, but a real house. A place that would actually be mine, where I could invest my time and money without worrying about someone else deciding my contributions didn't matter. I found the perfect little 2-bedroom house in a great neighborhood about 20 minutes from my office. Nothing fancy, but solid bones, and lots of potential. The kind of place where I could paint the walls whatever color I wanted, and plant a garden, and make it truly my own. The down payment came from what I had saved by not supporting my parents anymore, plus some of my emergency fund. For the first time in years, I was investing in my own future instead of trying to shore up someone else's. I also did something I had been putting off for years. I enrolled in those interior design classes I had always wanted to take. Evening courses at the community college, learning about color theory and space planning and all the things that fascinated me about home renovation. Turns out I had a real knack for it, probably developed during all those weekends spent overseeing the work at my parents' house. My new house became my canvas. I spent weekends at Home Depot and Lowe's, picking out tile and fixtures and paint colors. I learned to install a backsplash and refinish hardwood floors. Every improvement was mine. Every decision was mine. Every dollar invested was building equity in my own future. The best part? I loved coming home every day. My space, my rules, my choices. No family drama, no guilt trips, no wondering if my contributions were appreciated or if I was being taken advantage of. Meanwhile, the situation with my parents and Vivian kept getting worse. I heard through the grapevine that they were struggling to keep up with the house expenses and were starting to argue among themselves about who was responsible for what. Vivian was stressed about the financial burden. My parents were frustrated that their plan had backfired so spectacularly, and none of them wanted to admit they had made a terrible mistake. A few months later, I got a text from Vivian. Not a call, not a voicemail, just a simple text that said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know how much you had invested in the house. I never asked them to sign it over to me. Can we talk?" I read it, thought about it for a day, and then deleted it without responding. Some bridges once burned aren't worth rebuilding. Some apologies come too late and cost too little to mean anything. Besides, I was happy, genuinely, completely happy for the first time in years. I had my own beautiful home, a hobby I was passionate about, and the peace of mind that comes from knowing your investments are building your own future instead of subsidizing someone else's poor decisions. I still talk to the family members who supported me through the whole situation. My uncle and aunt invite me to holiday gatherings, and my grandmother calls every Sunday to check in and tell me how proud she is of the way I handled everything. My cousins include me in their group chats and social media posts, and I feel more connected to them than I have in years. As for my parents and Vivian, I hear updates occasionally, but I don't seek them out. Last I knew, they were considering selling the house because the expenses were too overwhelming, which is ironic considering how important it was to keep it in the family just a few months ago. But that's not my problem anymore. My problem is deciding whether to plant roses or hydrangeas in my front flower bed, and whether the guest bedroom should be painted sage green or dusty blue. Good problems to have, you know? Sometimes people ask if I regret sending that email, if I wish I had handled things differently. But honestly, that email was the best thing I ever did for myself. It cleared the air, established boundaries, and forced everyone to see the situation for what it really was. Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable, but it's always necessary. And sometimes the best revenge is just living well and building something beautiful that's actually yours.